Hello team, welcome back. Welcome to the Docker for DevOps training, and in this particular lecture we are going to learn how can we set up the Docker on Linux machine. So let's start. So we will learn about the Docker for Linux. So the Docker have a very easy install on the Linux and it has the native support on the Linux machine. So if you are using a Linux machine, your local computer have the Linux. If you are using a Linux VM, if you are using a Linux cloud machine, then this lecture is for you. You will learn how you can set up the Docker on the local Linux machine, on Linux cloud and Linux VM. So basically Docker is provide the native support for the Linux, right? It's not like the Mac and Windows where the Docker is running a tiny Linux container inside the OS, which is Mac or Windows. If you are using Linux, then the Linux provides the native support to the Docker. So it will not execute any additional Linux VM on your machine to execute the Docker processes. Your native operating system provides a native support to the Docker. So there are three ways to install the Docker on a Linux machine. The first way is a script, the second is Docker store, and third is Docker machine. So we will learn all three ways to install the Docker on your Linux machine. Right. So the first way is about the script. So how can you basically use the script to install the Docker on your machine? So you need to visit to get.docker.com and over there you will get the script to install the Docker on your machine. Please remember when we are installing the Docker with the script with the get.docker.com, then it will always install the edge release on your Linux machine, which means the latest edge release will be installed on your machine. So there are quite a benefit of the edge release as Docker, the latest functionality, the latest changes, you will consume all the latest functionality and all the latest changes ever, right? Edge is the release of the Docker which release monthly or sometimes quarterly, and which is the latest release of the Docker. The second way to install the Docker is you need to go to store.docker.com and you will find out the instruction for the each distro of the Linux. The installation of the Docker on the Linux VM, Linux cloud machine or Linux local machine, all the same processes, right? So there is no difference to install the Docker on Linux cloud machine and Linux local machine and Linux VM machine. We have a same set of instruction, we have a same set of procedure to install the Docker on a Linux machine. So let's see how can we install a Docker on Linux machine. So we will see how can we install the Docker on Linux machine. So very first way is, and after that we will see add users to Docker user group. So first we will see the install the Docker on a Linux machine. To install the Docker on a Linux machine, I need to open the Linux cloud machine which we have created in the last lecture. So I have on my DigitalOcean account and Docker, this is the Linux machine we have created in the last lecture. So if you are using a Linux distro or Linux in your local operating system, then it's up to you. Either you can use your local operating system to install the Docker or you can create a cloud machine. If you are using a local operating system, then there is a lot of benefits, right? You don't need to pay anything to anyone, right? And you have the resource as per your need, right? But if you're creating a cloud machine, then you need to pay for that particular machine to the DigitalOcean or the cloud provider. Either it could be AWS, it could be a Google Cloud or DigitalOcean, right? And you have a limited resources. Although altogether we can vertically scale the resources on the cloud, that is another part and not in the scope of this particular course. So I'm going to install the Docker on the cloud machine because in my local machine, in my native machine, I'm running the Mac operating system. For this, I will copy this IP and open the terminal. Increase the font size so that you can get it better. I will access that machine from my terminal SSH username and IP. Enter the password. Now I'm inside my cloud machine, right? If I run host name, then you can say it is returning Docker, which is the host name of my machine, right? So very first we will see how can we install the Docker using the store.docker.com. So I will go to store.docker.com. Right now I am on my store.docker.com and I have logged in with my account. To install the Docker, I will go to the Docker Community Edition as we are using Community Edition versions. And we know very well our machine is a Ubuntu based machine. So I will find out the distro which is available for the Ubuntu. So here is the Docker distro which is available for the Ubuntu, right? If you are using CentOS, you can choose this. If you are using Fedora, you can choose this, right? I'm using the Ubuntu, then I can choose this, right? And over here, I'm getting available for free to install on any server, VM or cloud with community support. By downloading this, you agree terms of the Docker software and users, right? Here is the complete description. How can we basically install the Docker on my machine, right? So these are the prerequisite. I need Xenial, Artful or Trustworthy 14.04. This is the minimum requirement for this particular distro. So here is the complete document which is available. So I will click this link. And over here we have the complete document to install the Docker on a Linux machine. So there are some prerequisites, like you should know your operating system type, right? And the Docker C supports Ubuntu on 64-bit, right? If you already have the Docker on your machine, then you need to uninstall it. To check, you can execute the command docker version. Press enter. So you are getting the program Docker is currently not installed. So it means Docker is not available on your machine, but you are getting a message. You can install it by typing apt install docker.io. You can install the Docker by this way as well, but it will install a very old release on your machine. For the latest release, we can follow the document which we have over here, right? So here is the processor to install Docker CE. And it is saying most users set up the Docker prerequisite install using repository, right? So first, before you install the Docker CE first time on a new host machine, you need to set up the Docker repository. Afterward, you can install the Docker update Docker from the repository. So to set up the repository, we need to execute this command as they are mentioned. So I simply copy this command and paste it over here. Press enter. So it is downloading something, and basically it is it will set up a repository for you on your machine. After this, install package to allow apt to use repository over HTTPS. For this, we simply execute this command. Press enter. So it will do, it works, and it is saying core certificates is already newest version, curl is already the newest version, software properties common is already the newest version. It basically done all the work. It's created the app package, or it's installed the app package for the repository, right? After that, we need to add Docker's official GPG key, right? So we execute this particular command. So all commands are mentioned on the official Docker site. And it is saying OK. And after then, the last command is to verify that you have the key, right? We don't need to do this. If you want, you can execute this, but there is no need to do this, right? This is just optional. So it is returning the public key is this, UID is this, and subdirectory is this. I will clear my console. And after then, the fourth step is use the following command to set up the stable repository. You always need to stable repository even if you want to install builds from edge or test repositories as well, right? So there are different commands for different kind of operating systems, right? We know very well we have the 64-bit operating system, but if you don't know your operating type system, then simply you can copy this command and execute on your machine, and it will return it's in Xenial based system, right? If you want to use what kind of operating system, it is 64-bit or something like that, you can execute lsb release -a. It is saying the complete destroy information. No LSB module available. Destroy is Ubuntu, and description is Ubuntu 16.04.5. Release is 16.4, and code name is Xenial. Now we know very well this is my operating system. So I will simply copy this command and execute on my machine. Press enter. After then you need to execute the command sudo apt get update. It will update all your packages. This will complete. After this, you will execute the command sudo apt get install ce. It will ask you to continue, press Y and press enter. So it will download the Docker on your machine and unpack the Docker CE version. So you can see the process is done, and after that it is saying to install a specific version of CE, install the list available of the versions. So we don't need any specific version, right? So we will leave it. After this, if you will execute the command docker version, then you can see it is returning the client is 18.06.1 and server is 18.06.1, right? So basically Docker is installed on your machine and it is saying the version is 18.06.1 CE, which is community edition, right? So this is the way how can you install the Docker on your Linux machine. The commands will be same if you are using Linux in local machine, if you are using Linux on cloud as we are using, or if you are using any Linux virtual machine. So we have seen how we can install the Docker. Now we will see how can we add a user to Docker user group. So what does it mean? Why we are doing this? So basically let's see how we can add a root user in the Docker user group. After that we will discuss about the application of this particular use case. To add the user or your root user in your Docker group, you need to execute the command usermod -ag Docker and your username. So I want to add root as a user in my Docker user group. Press enter and it's done. Right? So what does it mean? Why we are adding a root user as a user in the Docker user group? So basically in this particular course you need to update, you need to create and implement and execute a lot of things. Every time if you are not added your root user as a Docker user, then every time you will execute some Docker command, you will face some kind of errors like you don't have the permission and like that. So to avoid these kind of situations, we need to use sudo, but with the sudo we need to provide the password as well, right? So to avoid these kind of stuff, to avoid the delay, we are basically using a root user as a Docker user. So for this, we will add our root user into the Docker user group, right? If you will execute the command docker version, it will simply execute, right? You don't need to provide any sudo command or something like that, right? That's all. Now next thing is about the code editor. So if you are using Linux in your local machine, then you can execute or you can install the Visual Studio Code Editor, which is a very native and you can say which is very functionally rich code editor for the Docker, right? Because it has the Docker extension. So in the last lecture, we have seen how we can install the Visual Code Studio on a Mac machine. If you want to install the same on your Linux machine, then simply you need to go to the Visual Code Studio. or simply download Visual Code Studio, press enter, and you will get the download link. You can use the Debian version or RMPM version, right? If you want any version, you can get it over here, right? So Visual Code Studio is available for the Windows, for Debian based systems, and for the Mac OS as well, right? So we will use the Visual Code Studio as a code editor in this particular course. So we have discussed all these things. We have seen how we can install the Docker. We have seen how we can add user to the Docker user group. We can see how which code editor we are going to use in this particular course, right? Now we will see how we can install Docker machine and Docker Compose, right? So to install the Docker machine and Docker Compose on your Linux machine, you need to visit docs.docker.com. So what are the Docker machine and what is the Docker Compose? We will have a complete sections on these particular topics which we are going to use in this particular course. So in these sections, we will learn all the application and uses of the Docker machine and Docker Compose. Right now, it's enough to know that Docker machine and Docker Compose are the tools of the Docker toolset, right? So to install the Docker machine and Docker Compose, we will visit docs.docker.com. Once you will be on the docs.docker.com, you will get a search over here, type Docker machine, and you will get a link install Docker machine. Simply click it, you will land over here. And over here, you will get a complete commands to install the Docker machine on your local machine, right? So we will go to the prerequisite install Docker. We have already completed that path. Now download the Docker machine binary and extract it to your path, right? For the Mac OS. For the Linux, we need to execute this command. So we simply copy this command, right? And execute on our terminal. So clear the console and paste this command. Press enter. So it will take some time. Just wait until the complete download will done, and after that it will install the Docker machine on your machine. Once the process will done, you can execute the command docker-machine version, and it will return you the version of your Docker machine. So currently the Docker machine version 0.14.0 is installed on my machine, on my Linux machine, right? In the same way, we can install the Docker Compose. For that, I need to again search for Docker Compose, right? And we'll get the link install Docker Compose. Click it, and you will land on the page install Docker Compose, right? And over here, we are getting different options for Mac, for Windows, and for Linux. We will go to the Linux, and we will learn on Linux you can download the Docker Compose binary from this. Follow instruction from the link which involve running curl command. By simply this command, you can basically install the Docker Compose on your machine. It is saying use the latest Compose release number in the download command. If you have problems installing the curl, alternative install options are over here. Apply executable permission to the binary, right? So first we will copy this command and execute it. So clear the console and execute that command. So it will take few seconds to install the Docker Compose on your machine. Once done, you need to provide the executable permission to the Docker Compose binary. For this, you need to execute this command. So I will copy it and paste it on my terminal. Once done, you can execute the command docker compose version, and it will return you the version of Docker Compose installed on your machine, which is currently 1.22.0 is installed on machine. So this is the way how can we install the Docker on a Linux machine, how we can install the Docker machine on a Linux machine, and how we can install the Docker Compose on a Linux machine. So this is the complete tool set which is installed on my Linux machine. With the Windows and with the Mac, this is not required. When we are installing the Docker on a Mac or Windows, the complete toolset will be come with the Docker installation package, right? But if you're using the Linux, you need to install the Docker Compose and Docker machine separately on your machine. So all the commands we used in this particular lecture, all the links we used in this particular lecture, I will attach all the links in the next lecture as a text so you can get it easily. If you are missing something in this particular lecture, you can let us know and we will improve it. So thank you guys. Thanks for your time.